I do that, and then like I never get a phone call.
All right, so welcome everybody. Life as an Android developer in Atlanta. So a couple weeks ago, just me and Kristen, who couldn't be here because she has a stomach virus, got together and just wanted to put together a different event for the city and more so for the tech community in Atlanta to bring people together and, you know, so everybody can meet each other and talk about our different experiences as developers in Android. So this is our panel, and I would like for each of you to go down the line and introduce yourself.
Oh, I chose the wrong seat.
Yeah.
Now I realize. Hi, I'm Matt Compton. I'm the Android lead over at Dragon Army. We're a mobile and innovation company that builds AR, VR apps, general purpose Android applications, and games.
Hi, I'm Yvonne. I'm more of a, self-taught Android developer. And I've also worked with a few companies where I kind of trained with Android development, like with State Farm, and some of my State Farm people were out here. And I also, do my own apps. So that's me.
I'm Alan Rodriguez. I work on the Android team at a company called Cabbage. We're a startup that does small business lending.
I'm Zach Simon. I'm a UX UI designer here at Big Nerd Ranch. So we teach a lot of people how to do things, and we also make great apps.
I'm Jason Atwood, and I'm an Android developer at Orion Labs. We make a push-to-talk walkie-talkie.
Nice. So it's gonna go like more general questions to start. So it's for everybody. You can go down the same line, the same pattern. How did you guys get into Android?
Sure. I started programming Android apps about 7 years ago, and they were Froyo and Gingerbread. And it really came down to my parents were going to give me a phone for Christmas, and I had to choose between iOS and Android. And I was like, iOS, well, that's pretty expensive to be a developer. It's like $100 a year, renewing this fee, and then the actual phone itself. But Android, it was cheap. It was like $20 and you're a developer for life. And so I was like, I'll go that route. And I chose Android and haven't looked back. It's not cheap.
So my experience is also quite similar to that one. It was more of, I was already a Java developer and I wanted to get into mobile development because, I don't know, they just seemed kind of cool. And I had a PC, so I was like, well, PC, I have an Android phone. Like, I already have all it takes to become an Android developer, so here I was as an Android developer, and I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years now, and gotten really serious into it the last few years, and never looked back.
So it's kind of a funny story being here, but I was working for Cisco at the time, doing graphics work on set-top boxes, and we had a company-wide training curriculum, or training materials, and I saw that we had an offering for an OpenGL ES course taught by Big Nerd Ranch that was coming up, and I was like, well, I'm really interested in this, and I want to go work. I want to go work on this stuff, and what team is doing that? And I found out we had a professional services team doing Android work locally, and I was like, okay, I took a week off of work and just crammed for a week and taught myself Android and tried to move over on that team, and it worked out. Never ended up doing any OpenGL ES work there, but that's it. I'm glad that's how it happened.
So Android. So I've been a designer, a UX designer for like 4-ish years now, and I had always worked on both iOS and Android projects. But I went to DroidCon, I guess 2 years ago was the first time, and it was just a really cool environment, a really cool group of people. And a notable lack of designers, which I was like, well, this is a cool gap to fill, so maybe I could do that.
So I got my start. I actually had some friends that worked here at Big Nerd Ranch, and they encouraged me to apply as a Rails developer. And so time went by, and I heard back from Charles. He said, hey, what do you think about doing Android? I said, well, I have no Android experience. So he sent me the book, and he said, we'll talk in a month. So I worked my way through the Android book, and then I eventually applied as an Android developer, got started here, and they just threw me in the deep end, and I've been doing Android development ever since.
So I guess, what is your favorite app and why?
Maybe Jason should start.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start this one. Square Cache is super easy. It does one thing. It does that one thing very well. It looks really good. Let's see, Airbnb. I like their app. I like that they have managed to like create their own entire like design language that works totally in their app and across all their products, and it just works like stupidly easy. Yeah, Waze just because it's so useful, but you know it could be better.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a really good app. I had to look.
Yes.
I think I really like Medium. I like to read things. I usually end up reading articles on my Kindle later, but whenever I'm browsing, I like the experience that they provide. And being a designer on both platforms, I can see like how they choose to use different elements on each to make sure that they're meeting users' expectations. And I respect that.
I'd probably say WhatsApp, just because I think they've sort of been able to accomplish like a good mixture of like material design, but also like their own sort of flavor on top of that, and it's also incredibly performant compared to any other messaging app out there. So.
You guys are gonna laugh, but my favorite app is the Google Calendar app because it has a lot of colors, and it's just for me. I'm like a more visual person, so like there's a color for every event that I have, and they're never the same color. So I'm like I feel special that I have like a lot of colors. So that means I'm doing something with my life on the calendar, and it's and they have so many modes. You have like week mode, and you have like agenda mode, and it's like. You, a person like me who just kind of want to see things in different formats, like if I would just want to see everything I have for the month or for the week, I can do that. They allow me to do that. Or if I just want to see it like, I don't know, this like tile strolling thing, I can do that too. So it's like, it's a good user experience, and a lot of transitions and animations that involve. So it keeps you engaged and interactive with it.
I'll give a shout out to Square Cache again, because that's a fantastic app, just perfectly designed, and it functions in this one realm just very, very well. But to give a different answer, I'll go with Mint. Again, another just really well materially designed app, and it does that one thing very well. And it's an app where I think the mobile client is actually better than the web client, which is a pretty good bar to beat.
Nice. So this one is more for Zach.
Oh.
Like, I guess what are the main differences in designing for Android versus iOS?
Oh, that's a good question. So one thing that I prefer Android for is its documentation. There's just an immense amount of design documentation that I guess is meant to take the place of designers. But it's really beneficial for like designers too, because we have this list of great components, how they're supposed to work, how they use material design. I think that's like definitely something that I like better about Android. I'd say one thing that's nice about iOS is auto layout and size classes, and not having to target a million different devices. Yeah.
Nice. So, oh, you said
No. Just,
So we can start with you, Matt. Describe like what's the culture like at your company, and like how it helps you like develop, or how it's helped your development practices.
Sure. So again, I work at Dragon Army, and we're an agency, and I would describe the culture as pretty friendly and casual, which is useful because I have no fear like going up to a UX designer that might be in the audience and talking to her and getting feedback on how to create these screens. And I have no fear talking to our other developers. It's kind of a big team that's all working together towards common goals. A lot of it reminds me of a product company where we're all kind of united behind that single product vision, but except we're an agency, so we're doing it for another company as opposed to just for our own products. And so that kind of unification is nice. So yeah, casual, friendly, and it's got all the random tech things like the drink fridge and dogs and like all those things are nice too. But I would say it's the people that make the difference.
Okay, so for me, since mostly my stuff is done self-taught or on my own, I can speak for culture. Like when I did work or like as in training with Android development team at State Farm. So just put into perspective, I worked at State Farm. I worked like mostly with Java, like the Java's. Like more Java full stack developer, but when I would go and train with the Android developers upstairs, it was like night and day. First of all, there's all the toys and like there's always snacks, doing like meetings and sometimes, and like the culture themselves, like it was mostly guys. It was all guys. And then I would just come up there and train out with them, but it was mostly male dominated. But like I didn't feel like I was the only female there because the culture was just all accepting. Anything I needed help on, doesn't matter what it was, anybody would just pitch in and help out, or eager to train and help out, and like want to see you progress and do better. So that's another thing that I look for, like especially with culture, that other people want to see you do great, and put a hand in that. So that breeds a great culture in my experience and in my personal opinion, and that's what I kind of see a lot with the Android development team, Android development environments, where everybody just want to see everybody do great and do something new and cool. So.
Yeah, I mean Kabbage. So Kabbage is a startup. I think it's pretty prototypical kind of Silicon Valley style startup. We don't really have a lot of programmers. It's mostly like a bunch of eccentric nerds arguing about programming. But I think on the mobile team at Kabbage, we have really good camaraderie, and we're all friends with each other, and I think that it makes work fun, and it also you feel invested in what you're working on. So I really like that. You care about what you're working on. So.
Nice. Yeah, so I think what you were saying, Matt, a lot of that I can echo. Like, it's really nice. We have teams that work really closely together on different projects. So like, if I'm working on one app, I'll probably be spending a lot more time with all the people on that project. But then it changes when I roll into different things. And so that's really nice. I get to meet a lot of different people and get really close to them in like a span of like 6 months, and then move on to another project. So I think that's really nice. So it's interesting because I feel like everybody here has like different perspective on this question in particular, because you're at a startup, you're at a pretty big company, and then you're doing consulting, you're working on a product, I'm doing consulting. So it's like everybody's got, it seems like the unifying element is kind of being nice to each other. But yeah, it's so crazy that like companies can be so different and still have that same like common thread of like, let's just be nice and like push each other forward. And I feel like that's a big thing for us.
Yep. Yep. So at Orion, I'm remote, and most of the team is in San Francisco. So a lot of the culture for us is built around trust and trusting everyone in the company. And so my boss has trusted me to not just get my work done, but to do my best work. And I have trust in the salespeople to make killer sales. And I have trust in the engineering team to build a great product. And we're all like feeding off of this trust, and that gives us a lot of kind of authority to make big decisions and make important decisions, and not sit and twiddle our thumbs about things. And we're all trying to earn each other's trust as well. Like, I'm gonna nail this thing. I'm gonna be killer on this thing because everybody else is depending on me to kick ass on this. And I think that's mostly what drives the culture of our company.
Nice.
So, how do you guys like learn about new things in Android? Like, what sources or outlets do you go to learn?
Oh man.
Let's start with you.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I will say I feel like I never have enough time to learn. I have like a block on my calendar on Wednesday mornings. It's like, I am not going to do work. I'm going to do Android stuff. Even it's like I'm reading about things that will not make me, a better Android developer on this product. I might be learning about, new libraries or new testing things, or playing around with side projects. But I had to like carve that time out. I made an agreement with my boss. Like, I'm going to be off the radar. You will not be able to get a hold of me. I'm going to be working on things that might not directly affect the company. But I need that time, otherwise I'm gonna get behind so quickly. There's just so much new information coming at me like every week.
What was the, we were talking about
Well, how do
How do you
learn.
learn it?
Okay.
learn new things in Android, and for you
Okay.
more specifically, designing it.
Yeah. So we look at material design as the Bible, and it is basically it dictates everything that we're allowed to do. No, but it's like, so there's like X and A. I'm always trying to read about what other designers and what other product teams are working on. So like this is really interesting to me, but also like I think like Medium is another good outlet to see like what are other teams doing, what are they doing differently, and what are they doing that's like tangential to the product that they're working on that helps them like learn and grow too. Reading.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with what Jason said. It's every year at I/O, it's like so many new things come out, and I feel like constantly always scrambling to, make time to read up on all these new things and just determine if they're even something you want to use.
Mm-hmm.
For me, primarily, I think I rely on Twitter, as lame as that sounds maybe, but
That's awesome.
try to follow as many like Google developer experts, stuff like that, and just see what talks they're giving, like what new blog posts they've done. I also have a subscription to a site called Caster.io that does like advanced Android development videos and like tutorials, like very short time length. They'll be like 10 minutes, so it makes it very easy to just sort of like get your daily dose of information.
Watch videos while you're eating lunch.
Yeah.
For me, it's YouTube, and a little bit more YouTube, and along with other things. But started out a lot with YouTube, watching the Google developer channels, the Google design channels, the Google I/O channel. Medium, I just recently discovered, which is amazing. What else do I use? Books, sometimes I just find like just take too much time for me to read something and then try to implement it, so I just kind of skip over with the books. It's too much going on in there. I'm usually focusing on like a particular thing anyway, so it's like I'm trying to go through the book and then read what they're saying, but most of them are like lessons upon another lesson that was from like 3 lessons ago, and I was like, I can't do that, so it's like trying to do that, so I'm like, I want something that's kind of like clean and short, because you don't have enough time, because you're always doing something and you're trying to learn something. So another method I've started implementing was an idea that I got from someone in here, Damon. It was a snippet idea, so just every time I learn something, I create a snippet of it, like do like a snippet of it with an app that just it's like an activity. For each activity is something that you learn new, and you kind of see it in the app. There's a few apps that do it out there that kind of does it as an Android training app, but if you do it as your own personal training for like smaller portions of what you need to learn, it makes it a lot easier to separate it out from like a massive app where you're trying to add it in, and you kind of can get defects from stuff that you don't even know where it is because you didn't kind of modularize it out. So trying to modularize what you learn in that manner makes it a lot easier for when you do have all these sources, you can have a way to implement it and see it right on hand. So those are kind of the sources I use mainly to learn more about Android.
I'll give a shout out to Android Weekly. It's a great weekly newsletter that goes out, and that's probably the #1 way I stay up to date on new libraries and just general news articles and blog posts. It just gives you a nice weekly summary that if I feel like I go through all of those and may not read all of them, at least see the headlines and understand what each is about, I feel like I can keep up to date despite the really rapid pace of change. And on top of that, local community events like this one and the Android Meetup when it does meet, and the ASG group that Lance runs, those all help as well, just for both interacting with the community and keeping up to date with general Android trends. So those are probably my 2 big ones: Android Weekly and then meetups.
Yeah.
So, what have been your experiences with other teams? So, like for example, how do you interact with the design team, or do you at all at your respective companies? We'll start with you, Matt.
Right. Okay, so there's a couple big groups that I'll have to interact with. One would be the iOS developers. The second would be the API developers, and the third would be designers. And then maybe you have some like client relations and project managers. But in general, it's like one of those 3 big groups that I'm having to deal with. And with iOS, we're always trying to keep in lockstep usually. So I'm constantly talking with my iOS lead, Michael Biggs, and just communicate with him constantly about where's iOS at and how can Android keep pace or maybe follow up behind them. Because it's very rare that Android's leading the way on any given feature. It's usually iOS first. So I'm constantly communicating with that iOS lead to understand what their roadmap is and how Android can follow through. With the API developers, they're hopefully way ahead of whatever we're going to be implementing in the app. And so I'll communicate with them usually weeks in advance of actually implementing the feature that requires that API so that we can work out just what they'll be sending to me and how I'll be using it and make sure there's no miscommunication. You know, in the middle of a sprint, I'm trying to figure out how does this API work. So iOS and API, I'm just hoping that they're clearing the way for the Android app to have smooth sailing. With design, it's more ad hoc, I would say. Like we get things way in advance, hopefully. But there's also a lot more turnaround of, hey, like I have this idea of how this could be tweaked slightly. And so I can go to our designers and have them hear me out. And we can kind of negotiate back and forth what the Android app should look like. Maybe, you know, text sizing or colors or whatever it may be. It's more of an ongoing negotiation and tug of war. But in a friendlier term than tug of war.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, so at Cabbage, our design team uses a tool called Envision. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of it. Our designer will like upload the screens and mockups onto Envision, and we will comment and provide our feedback and interact through Envision, like iterating through designs in that fashion. But really, for most of the interaction, it's literally just go walk up to where someone sits, ask them a question, try to get a conversation going in that way. Same holds for our platform team or our front end team. Really, just go up and ask them.
Yeah, we do a lot of the same, like a lot of just close communication, walk over, talk, figure it out. But usually, like the designers on our team try to stay ahead of the developers by like 1 or 2 sprints, so that if there is like a major pivot or something, we haven't designed out like a whole thing that needs to be thrown away. But for the most part, it's just like, how can we like give you something before we give it to a client, make sure it's okay, give it to the client, make sure we're seeing the build before we deliver. That kind of like feedback loop, I think is something that we're pretty proud of, and that's something that we try to do on every project.
Yeah, I'll second that. Like, tightening up that feedback loop is what has helped us quite a bit as well. So our Android team is entirely remote from the rest of the company, so we have to rely on a lot of specific tools that help us keep communicating, and some of those are like we have a regularly scheduled UI and Android meeting where we're all essentially in the same Google Hangout chatting about things. But we also make sure that we use Zeppelin as well, which I think is similar to Envision, so that things can get distributed kind of, you know, asynchronously. And we also, the first people that get a build is actually our design team, not QE and not product, and so they get things first. Yeah,
that's great.
So we're hearing back from them hours, days after we've, you know, instead of weeks after we've implemented something. And then, of course, you know, we still have those impromptu communications where a developer will, you know, spool up a Hangout, and we use something called Visor to do Android screen sharing, and so the developer can run through the device, you know, with all of the animations in place, and get the developers or get the designers' feedback like right there in real time, since we can't just walk over to their desk, you know, halfway across the country.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
That's cool.
So what are your favorite third-party libraries and why? And for Zach, what's your favorite tool to design for
Right.
Android between Envision, Sketch, and Zeppelin?
Okay.
I'll go first. So I obviously I like all of Square's libraries. I like, again, just like their apps, they do one thing and they do those one things very well. But the thing I like most about their libraries is that they're good examples on how everybody else should build libraries. So if you were thinking, oh, I've got this idea, I want to release this, spend some time and see how they manage their own, dependencies, how they release things, how they document things. Because those are the examples of those are the other kinds of libraries that I'm going to want to use. So if you've got something and it does 10 million things and it does them sort of poorly, and you've got 900 GitHub issues open, I'm probably not going to use your thing. But if you model how Square uses their, creates their libraries, then I'll probably use it too.
Design tooling, so everybody's been saying InVision and Zeppelin, and those are all like really great. We've been using Zeppelin a lot on a lot of our projects. It kind of ends up being like GitHub for designers, because that's where we push all the final things that we're really are secure and we're gonna be moving forward with. I'd say even for developers here that are curious, Sketch is a super easy to pick up tool. And if you're interested in figuring out how the UI is put together by the designer, a lot of that can help you inform how you can build a component to make it look somewhat similar. So I recommend that. I think Sketch is a great tool for that. And then also there's a great animation tool called Principle that allows us to build really, really great and robust prototypes with really robust animation. And that works really well with Sketch, so that's a really great one.
I guess I would probably go with RxJava. I feel like it's become so widespread. I don't really know if that's secret library or kind of a cool hip library to pick anymore. But there's a huge learning curve, especially when you first start using it. But it's very expressive and can simplify a lot of the sort of interactions that would, using say async task or other sort of approaches require much more code and aren't necessarily, as maintainable or testable. So.
I'm going to second that one, because I just started working on Room, and using RxJava with Room is just fun. So I'm going to go with that one too. That was good.
Cool. I'd probably go with Dagger. It'd be hard for me to imagine architecting a modern Android app without some kind of dependency injection, and so Dagger 2 would probably be my choice for the one library that I would take anywhere. Being able to separate out mocks versus the live data manager, for example. That type of flexibility just helps testing. It helps just generally with your architecture of the app and separating out different layers. So that'd be the one I would take with me.
All right, cool. This is more for the developers. Have you adopted Kotlin, and if so, what has been your process or feelings towards it, towards working with it?
Yeah, I played around with Kotlin in my own time on just sample apps and personal projects, but we have not adopted it for our client projects. And part of that is it's tough to justify to a client using a new language, especially before this past Google I/O, which kind of changed things by making it the official Android language as a counterpart to Java. But it's still kind of difficult to sell that to a client, because when we hand off that app, suddenly they're having to find a Kotlin Android developer, which is even more rare than the unicorn of a Java Android developer. So that's a tough sell. I think eventually, over the next few years, we'll transition to using Kotlin on client projects. But right now, it's difficult.
Yeah, I haven't yet, because I'm trying to see where it's going. Of course, it's saying it's going to be the official new language, but I just want to wait and see what all happens with it before I just hop on over and start changing all my my code over to it yet, even though I know there's a generator out there to make it a lot easier. But I'm a little hesitant on it, which is how I treat most trends. I'll wait and see what happens. So that's why I'm ready.
So I'm a big Kotlin aficionado. At Cabbage, we started using Kotlin probably, I think, a year and a half ago. I saw the Jake Wharton white paper that he did presented internally at Square, why they should start switching to Kotlin, and it was very compelling. And I went through and spent. It doesn't take very long to learn, probably a couple of days. I did that, and it changes your life. It's much more pleasant, and you've probably, if you haven't used Kotlin before, you probably on any given day do something like this, probably like a dozen times. If foo not equal to null, open curly bracket, do what you really want to do, close curly bracket. You're never going to do that again. And the fact that like you're taking, I guess, essentially like nullness is now being as part of the language. It's you no longer have to like test for null. I don't know. I found it. I'm a huge fan, and I'd encourage everyone to give it a try. So.
Yep.
Yeah, so I have also yet to adopt it. I know that I need to. I know that I want to. I know that it will be a big win. But it was like the first time I started using RxJava. It's like I know that I'm going to be, my productivity is going to tank first, and then I'm going to get it, and then I will improve. And the state of our project right now doesn't really, facilitate me moving any slower through the project. Unfortunately, we're already doing enough other new things that I can't throw Kotlin at it as well. So once our project stabilizes, it's just myself and another developer who's equally excited about learning Kotlin. So we'll probably take it on and start migrating things. I'll wait for a few more Stack Overflow questions that are Kotlin specific.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with Zach for this one, but then the rest of you guys can fall in.
Okay.
What's your favorite feature you've worked on design-wise, and what were its challenges?
Oh, that's a really good question. On Android. Can you come back to me?
Yeah.
Favorite feature. So this isn't on a current project, but on the project I was on before, we had a few forms in our app that were like entering credit card information, name, credit card information, and what we had done is essentially write a little internal library that wasn't good enough to release at all, but it would let us validate this form and use basically everything was edit text. So we could display the errors on the edit text in a more seamless way to the user. So instead of just validating the entire field as soon as the user entered one piece of text, we would, after they had entered the first item, we would validate that, is this a valid credit card number? And then after they'd entered their name, we would validate, is this a valid name? And we got it working really seamlessly and isolated it so that we could kind of reuse this validator throughout our project. And it just made for a much more seamless, I know my credit card information is wrong. I haven't entered the expiration date yet. Don't tell me this needs to be 3 digits. I haven't got to that field yet. So we built something that was much easier to use and only really shouted errors at the user when they actually made mistakes. And it ended up looking pretty slick. Yeah.
I thought of something.
Okay.
So I was on a project, I think, with you. Yeah, I think it was. We were porting an existing iOS app to Android. And this isn't specific to one feature, but what was really cool was trying to convince the client on using material design. And it was interesting just kind of explaining the whole material design deal to them, and then seeing it happen in their head, oh, this is what people expect on this platform. And so that was a cool thing that I worked on.
I think recently I would probably say, I don't know if you guys have used animated vector drawables. So there's a tool out there, which the name is escaping me, but you can do, you can essentially align the paths of 2 different animated vector drawables and then animate between them. And it's creates this really unique effect, essentially one image reconfigures itself into another image. That was pretty fun. We didn't end up using it, but I liked working on it.
Mine is gonna be super simple, which is kind of how I am in general. But it was the progress bar. But the unique thing about it was the circle kind, where you have the number inside, like you see on most web applications. But you never really see it much on most mobile apps. Not a lot really. But I saw it on Google's Fit, and I was like, I want to do that. And so Google Fit has it where when you reach your progress of 10,000 steps, it'll you'll go, just simple progress in a circle. But the cool thing was, I wanted to have like numbers in the middle. It was like percentage and everything. So I figured out how to do that using vector drawables. Made it super simple and easy. But I just kind of tricked it out to make it look like super sleek and fun looking. So that was kind of when I finally figured out how to do that and make that work out. I was like, sweet, I'm winning.
Tough question. I'm going to go with, on my current client project that I'm working on, I had a chance to implement the collapsing toolbar layout and the app bar layout, and working with those for the first time was pretty exciting because it's a really great example of material design, like in action, because it's where you drag down and it collapses a large header just to meet the toolbar, and maybe have some parallax scrolling with the alpha of what that content looks like, and then the transparent status bar and getting that to work just right. Like having all those things come together with these different libraries from the support lib is a nice feeling of like, wow, I did it, like material design. Boom.
At its
So
best.
it's a nice moment.
Nice. So we'll start with Zach for this one, and then we'll trickle down again.
It's like you're targeting me.
Yes. So, what's new for design in Android Oreo that you're really excited about? And for the developers, what's new in Oreo that you're excited to play with?
I want to say adaptive icons. They're finally, icons are going to be unified on the home screen, which is like really exciting for me because I'm kind of crazy about that stuff. But being able to make sure that an icon like fits in every different size and shape that could happen essentially is exciting, and it seems like it'll be a huge problem to solve.
You're assuming that I've been keeping up.
Assuming that I even saw.
And I'll admit I'm already behind the curve on a lot of O stuff. So I don't know. Something. Yeah, ask me again in a month.
All right.
Answer, yeah.
Well, I can say this one pretty easily off. Font support, custom font support, especially in XML. iOS has had the equivalent of that for years. Who knows how long? I don't know. I'm an Android developer. Yeah, it's really nice because before you had to say, oh yeah, like every activity or fragment, construct the typeface, apply it to the text views that I care about. Now you just define one style, and you're done.
It's a close second for me.
Drop mic.
Yeah.
For me, view model is what I'm kind of excited about getting to now, because I don't really want to mess around with too much more with configuration changes, like with screen when you change the screen from like vertical to horizontal. I really don't want to deal with that. Like, just do it for me, okay? And so that's going to be fixing those issues. So I'm like, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Cool, yeah, I'm going to second custom fonts. It used to be, for me, most of the projects I'd work on, calligraphy was a must-include library just to configure those custom fonts. It just made it so much easier to work with. But now I don't have to depend on some third-party library to get custom fonts. I can just have it be part of the IDE and part of actual Android framework. So that is very pleasant.
Yeah, and the fact that it's supported by the support library too. It's not just an Oreo specific thing.
Yeah, that's a good
You
point.
can use it as far back as you want to.
Yeah, I think it's like 14.
Yeah, well, I think that's as far back as the support library goes now.
Nice.
Yeah, could have anything else out.
So, what development tools have made your Android development a better experience for you versus when you started?
Okay, Android Studio. I remember doing Eclipse Android development, and that was a whole different form of pain. Yeah, Android Studio was a game changer. Having IntelliJ level refactoring just enables me to extract whole classes and rename things. It's like being given fire for the first time compared to Eclipse, which is a great IDE in its own right for people that still use Eclipse. But Android Studio is focused and does Android development really well.
True. For me, I'm going to say GitHub. When it came on the scene and started being heavily used, for me it's like a freelancer and everything, trying to keep up with the old SVN repositories. It's like, ugh, I don't want to. But like GitHub is already integrated with Android Studio. It makes it super easy for me to just manage my projects, manage my branches and builds. So, you know, that's, for me, that's really heavy.
So I'd probably say like Sketch is good. I mean, I don't want to take that one away from you. Like Sketch is much more intuitive to use than like Adobe Illustrator, and I think it's much more well suited to creating mobile designs. I'm gonna go with like a probably like not very well known tool, but there's a site called it's just called like SVG2 Android, and I found that it does a much better job of preparing vector assets for Android than the built-in wizard does in Android Studio.
So I'm gonna say Sketch, obviously, because we were using like Illustrator before, and God forbid Photoshop to like design UI. Yeah, like why? So that's been like hugely helpful, but also like just in terms of designing animation, I'm gonna say Principle, because there really wasn't a tool, unless you wanted to devote the time in like After Effects to making this really special moving picture. There really wasn't a useful tool to design UI animation until Principle came on the scene.
I would actually say probably Zeppelin. Before any time that I wanted to ask a developer a question about a specific thing, I would have to, my default thing was usually take a screenshot, bring it up in whatever paint tool I had, and start like drawing comments on it, with hand chicken scratch. And I like that Zeppelin essentially lets me like tag little parts of the UI and ask questions right there. What's the typeface here? What's the text size here? And then they'll get notified and they can respond, right back in Zeppelin. That's made that turnaround much easier.
Yeah.
I'd also answer Gradle to this one.
Yeah.
For anyone that's used Ant or Maven or Ivy or any of those other build tools, Gradle is kind of a game changer too, especially when it comes to dependency management. So I wanted to throw that up there.
Yeah, I caught it.
Or since you bring up dependency management, I'll say there's a little website just called Methods Count, and it's like type in the package name and the version, com dot, what is it, rxjava.1.6, and it will dump out like all of the dependencies of that library and how many methods are in it, how many classes are in it, and it's super convenient. Like if I'm thinking about a new library, that's the first place I'm going. It's like, okay, what am I really going to get by pulling this in? I don't have to go through their source code and see what their dependencies are.
See, I feel like I got to one-up you there.
Yeah,
'Cause
go
I
for
have to
it.
say,
No,
I
that's
have to
fine.
say, no, ProGuard.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
then you can just pull it in and get rid of all the ones you aren't using, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, multi-decks used to be horrible, right?
Yep.
And you had to, like, if you didn't use ProGuard, your life was going to be a living hell.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's on.
Yeah.
So, with the exclusion of tonight, have you given a talk at a meetup or a conference? And if so, how has it affected your career?
I'll go first, I guess. I have given a talk at a local meetup. I don't know how it has affected my career. It definitely helped me feel even more confident. I certainly don't think I'd be up here if I hadn't done that first. And to be fair, I don't remember what I was talking about, but I know that I had to spend a lot of time preparing for it, and in speaking about it, became even more of an expert on the thing. I had to, I know I'm going to get questions. I can't just know this surface crust about what I'm going to say. Someone's going to ask me something back, and I can't just, I don't know anything beyond this thin layer. So it forced me to dig deeper into things, expecting these potential questions. And that, I think, influenced a lot of how I've learned things in the past. Instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to add this library now, I'm going to get asked by somebody, the guy sitting at the next desk or a developer in a year, hey, why did you do this? And having to explain and justify my decisions ahead of time, or at least think about what my justification will be, has made me better at doing what I'm doing. Instead of just, okay, well this works, so let's slap it on, Band-Aid it. No, I'm gonna get asked questions. Why did you pick this library or this one? And I'm gonna need to answer those questions. So speaking kind of led to that mode of thinking.
Yeah, totally ditto that. That deep dive is super important. And so like one of the conferences that I spoke at was DroidCon New York with Kristen Marsicano, who's amazing. And I think the thing that I guess changed for me the most in my career is just afterwards meeting all these people that were like, yes, that you were saying the things that I've been wanting to hear, and being able to talk to them about it. I think like overall, like going to conferences or even like speaking at conferences are a great way to meet people very quickly, because they'll all want to come talk after. Which
It's
is
just
great.
you. It's
Yeah.
just you.
This is just, I'm just a magnetic personality.
It's the smile.
I'm blushing.
I haven't spoken at a conference, so yeah, I don't really have any comment on that.
Yeah, me neither.
I've spoken at a couple conferences. I want to say like 4 or 5 at this point, and more meetups than I can count. But I would say the big thing it did for me was improve confidence, like hearkening to what Jason said. Before ever giving any talks, I gave my first one, I guess, probably like 3 or 4 years ago when I was at BNR. My first few talks were pretty terrible, but I went and did them anyway, and people found them useful, even though they're kind of terrible. Because at least you're putting yourself out there and like trying and presenting something to other people that they can understand. And a lot of people never even make that attempt. So for me, it was like, hey, at least I'm doing this thing. And over time, I mean, naturally, you're going to get better at it if you do it over and over. And so I just kept going to the meetups and kept giving bad talks until eventually I think they weren't that bad, and they've improved. So just step by step, it improved my confidence. And you can take that into other places of your career as well.
Yeah. I think the first time you do it, it's like this: you've broken through this ice now, and it's like, okay, now it might have been terrible. God, I hope it's not on video. I don't want to go back and see how terrible I was, but I did it and I survived, and so now I can speak to the CEO of our company, and I can speak to outside, salespeople, and I can, speak at other meetups, bigger meetups, without feeling that like terrible, like, oh my God, I'm gonna blow this.
That happens like every time though. That same feeling.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe it goes away for some people.
It started to go away at some point. Yeah.
Nice. So this one's different. What would you like to see or learn or contribute to the Android community in Atlanta? And for Zach, what would you like to contribute or learn from the design community here?
Am I going?
Well, no, it's very light.
I don't know. Maybe smaller, more casual, more frequent kind of interactions. It's tough for all of us to get together, once a week. That's in a part of town that's convenient for enough people. That it's not, one rainy night and the thing gets delayed for a week. And there's an official speaker. I think it would be more fun if more people kind of just shot the shit, got beers, and chatted about things. 3 people here, 5 people there, without it being cliquey, but by any means. But I think those more casual, smaller, more frequent meetups are easier to make happen, and I think it would facilitate a lot of more nebulous kind of communication. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that would be really cool. I would love to see more. I would love to see this like wonderful Atlanta design community and this wonderful Atlanta Android community come together a little bit more, because like, I mean, I've seen a few designers here tonight, but like, there's so much knowledge that we could be sharing and learning from each other to make products better, just in general. So yeah, I think that would be my one wish for Atlanta.
I mean, I think I like that idea because there's a lot of great designers in Atlanta, but some of them haven't even heard of material design. It's like
Yeah.
weird. But yeah, I think going off sort of what Jason said, I think I've seen like for instance like the Python meetup that here in Atlanta, they have all these different events and they're all like focused towards different kind of things. They have like your classic presentation style event, then they have like coding jam sessions that are like supposed to help people that are interested in Python or like teach you new things. And I think it'd be really good if like we could sort of get that kind of thing going where it wasn't just, hey, listen, everyone sit in a room and listen to this guy tell you about something, whatever it be, and that's it.
I think I was first, second, and third, all that, because when I first started, like trying to become an Android developer, especially like as a woman, and as just new to the Android scene, I just didn't find there was a lot of resources at the time available where I can just go and talk to some people who knew Android very well. It seemed like it was a very close-knit community. If you wasn't already an Android developer, you couldn't be an Android developer. So it's like, I was like, so how am I going in there? I don't know. I just kind of keep doing it. So it's like having more meetups, and the ones that I did see, I signed up for them and then they didn't have them. So it's like having committed meetings where like you actually, people actually keep up with the meetings and don't cancel them on you would be kind of awesome. And just code jams would be amazing, because some of the stuff, like we were saying, we're getting behind because we haven't touched on it yet, and we had other things to do. We have a code jam or like a session on it and just kind of get a brief overview of it and jam out with some other people that's also doing some stuff that you can kind of look in on and see what they're doing and how they're applying it would be amazing. And also a lot more food. Food feeds my heart first. And then
I like that idea about the food. But yeah, I would say consistent meetups would be the one thing I'd really want for Atlanta. Like meetup meaning events, literal meetups, whatever it may be, but having that consistency. And right now I think the closest thing is the GDG Atlanta, because as far as I know, that's met every month for a year or so at the same space, and that type of consistency is what I'd like to see, rather than like short bursts of big events. Just have them regularly on a schedule and inclusive.
All right, that's my questions, but I'd like to open up the floor for any questions in the audience, which you may have for the panel.
Was that group you mentioned that's consistent, meeting regularly?
For me?
No.
You're talking about
GAG or something?
GDG, which is the Google Developers Group, and
Lance.
Lance runs it.
What is it?
So it's a Google developer group, and the idea is that it's kind of a group that meets, we can branch out with other things. In fact, like we have Women Tech Makers, and then there's also the main GDG event. And it meets, like I said before, the main one meets once a month. We've been doing double headers, and especially with like the sort of the lack of Android meetup things that have been happening, we've been doing double headers where we have one Android talk, and then we have one talk that's related to something else, like cloud technologies or something else like that. So we meet over at Tech Square Labs, and it's the, what is it?
It's the third Tuesday.
Yeah, I should know this off the top of my head. Thanks, David. Yeah, he's one of the co-organizers too, David, yes. And so that's, while I've got the floor here, actually, too, I'll just pitch really quick. Might as well do it, right? So we have a Dev Fest coming up, too, and that's going to be November 4th. And by the way, so has anybody here either spoken at a conference or want to speak at a conference? Your Android development. All right, if you do, we have a Dev Fest coming up, and we do have a call for speakers, so that's something that I could either share with maybe you folks or whatever like that information on how to find out about that, because we'd love to basically have and also we'd love to have everybody else come out. Tickets are fairly inexpensive right now. They're $40. It's going to be one day. And right now we're aiming towards 3 tracks.
Any other questions? Yes, David.
Hey. So Accenture announced today that they're bringing like 500 tech jobs to Atlanta. There are all these rumors about Amazon potentially coming here as well. Fingers crossed. How do we see the Atlanta tech scene like changing over the next 3 years?
You want to start with that one?
I'm not sure if we're qualified. Sure, I'll tell you my opinion. Based on that news, it sounds like it's going to be busier. So I'm hoping that we get more professionals that'll be involved in the community. My hope is that if we have more developers and designers, that there will be more people coming to these types of events. But that doesn't necessarily hold true unless they know about them and that we can get the word out. So I think as Atlanta grows and as the tech scene improves, we just need to kind of be vigilant to make sure people are invited and that people are included.
There's going to be more traffic.
Yeah,
Well,
as long as I don't drive.
And I think another thing that not a lot of people kind of pay attention to until you have to look for another job is how competitive it's gotten. But along with the competitiveness, the more strenuous the hiring process is now. You know, when I first started out in developing, when I first got my first developer job right out of college, they just asked me for questions, and if I can answer them, I got the job. But now it's like, now you have to do assessment. They're going to ask you some questions. They want to meet with you, all to kind of weed out or trying to get a better fit for their company, which I understand, which makes sense. But you know, with that comes more people who come to Atlanta, and the more competition, but also more diversity. So it's not all bad. It's like more diversity, more people you can that'll know more about it, instead of having to be like a smaller, may open up and be a broader community, and you can then have those bigger events and then have bigger meetups and more knowledge. So traffic, but also you could probably look on the bright side, you may have more resources to go to for you know, learning and meeting.
I mean, I think there's sort of, I think Atlanta's in an interesting position. I mean, so are a number of other cities in the country. I mean, you sort of have the Bay Area and New York City as like the prime locations for technology. And you could go further and say even for mobile development. And you know, Atlanta's made a lot of progress over the past 10 years in the startup scene, in becoming like a tech hub. And I think, you know, it's trending upwards, but there's still the question of, are you going to get big tech companies in Atlanta, and whether, you know, that happens like Amazon or what have you. I don't know, you know, that's still to be decided.
And rent.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I mostly hope that they don't swallow everybody up. It'd be nice
Yeah.
if there were still small development shops and people could, you know, people could feel free to like venture off and try new things. If you go to work at Accenture, you're going to make a lot of money. If you go to work at Amazon, you're going to make a lot of money, and you're not going to have an incentive to like, I'm going to quit this and try something crazy and new. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, for sure.
What does take up all your time in these massive workshops?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll ask an off-the-wall question just for fun. What phone do you carry?
Everyone's quiet.
Look it up, bad boy.
Google Pixel.
Nice.
Sweet. You fancy.
Where is it?
I've got the 5X. I find myself, I'm always a year behind on whatever the phone is, at least, which is fine by me. So, yeah.
Nice. I'm using a 6P right now. I'm really excited about the Pixel 2. I hope it actually looks like that. It's nice.
I've got Galaxy S7 right now.
Yes. S7 Edge.
Have they exploded at all?
That's the note.
Oh, so how can I confuse it?
You just know one of them explodes and you don't want the whole brand. I'm gonna skip out on all of them.
Yeah.
So I guess half of mine is design oriented and half of it is development oriented. I did consulting, and I'm about to start working on some iOS and Android apps. Now I want to know if you guys have any advice for how to keep parity between the two applications, and also make sure that I'm following like the right user interface guidelines and handling the interactions appropriately on both platforms.
Yes. I'm actually talking about this Friday, which is totally crazy. Yeah, so definitely follow HIG for iOS, definitely follow Material Design Guidelines for Android. But there is like a common thread between these two things, and that's like the features that you want to offer, because you want to make sure that they have feature parity. And then there's also like some broader navigation elements that largely stay the same on both platforms, like how the user moves through the overall experience through tabs or whatever. So I think like you can kind of look at it as keep the big picture in mind and like how the user is supposed to move through and do all these things, but then let the UI change per platform. It's a good way to like put it in your head. Keep yourself sane.
Yeah, I mean, I think he nailed it. Basically, like you have to keep in mind like the sort of the interaction that you're going to go for on both platforms, but there's different ways. You want to try to utilize, I guess, the most native classes and patterns to do that. Unless, you know, that's part of what you're doing is creating a bunch of custom animations and custom views and so forth. But doesn't always have to, I think you just have to sort of accept that it's not always going to look exactly the same. It's not always, you know, that's not the best approach ever.
Yeah, I think getting to a point where you can articulate and defend the decisions to separate them and spend time making them both look good will pay off. Like, there are valid reasons to do that, to take the time and make these look right. And the better you are at elevator pitching them, then the more likely you are to actually get the people that you're building the software for to agree with you. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I would say work with your iOS team / lead / dev, whoever that may be. Oh, you're doing both apps? Good luck.
Talk to yourself in the mirror.
Ask yourself why.
And designing it, right?
Wow, unicorn.
It's a full stack in a different direction.
Wait, I just saw like an Android talk in I/O about what was this Google Developer Paris or France or Europe? Google Developer Europe. They had one about, it's called Firebird. I don't know if you heard of it. So basically, it's Google's way of doing like a native script where you can code on one platform. I think it's like HTML, JavaScript based, and it spits out to both, and it uses Fire, and they call it Firebird because I forget the first part of it, but the last part is using Firebase as well. So you apply these two together in order to just kind of spit them out. If you, like you said, you're a consultant, which means you're probably going to be doing it by yourself or with one other person or something like that. Yeah. So another way you can do it is use what Google has right now in order to allow you to spit both of them out, compile both of them. It's one set of code for both, and it seems like it's supposed to be really good. You know about it, Lance?
Well, yeah, the other thing I was gonna ask is if you've heard of Flutter.
I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Flutter, is it Flutter Fire?
No, it's just Flutter. Just Flutter.
It's Flutter.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if you meant that with the idea.
Yeah, Flutter, and it's called Flutter Fire, Flutter Bird or something, because they added, they coupled it with Firebase in order to create like a seamless integration in the talk anyway. They call it Flutter Fire.
Yeah, Flutter is based primarily, I think, more so. It seems like it's dark. I didn't play with it much.
It is dark. It's dark.
That's what I thought. And there's been a big push within Google with that too. In fact,
it uses the Android NDK on Android.
Yeah, right, exactly. So in fact, if you want to take some time to play with Flutter, CFP, Google's been really interested in seeing more people play with it and stuff like that. So it's
yeah. So I mean, that is an option if you're low on time or just want to dive into it.
Yeah, not often that I'll promote hybrid development, but the position you're in, that might be a good use case for it.
Yeah.
There's also like React Native, which is like an avenue, I guess.
So top choice.
Yeah. Cool. Depending on how you feel, something that's been on my I want to play with this at some point is kind of doing hybrid, but from the other end, instead of like writing something that compiles down to Java or Swift. There's a tool from Dropbox called Genie that will essentially let you write the model and the business logic in C++, and then it will up compile to Java and Swift, and then you build your UIs natively on top of that. And so you're essentially maintaining one core code base that's in C++, and then both of your apps depend on that.
Sweet.
That's how Google created Inbox from a model layer perspective, is that they wrote everything in Java and then used GWT for the web code, used J to Objective-C for the iOS code, but they had that one model object just written in Java.
Yep, and then you just test it, purely independently of where it's being utilized, That's always something I'd wanted to play around with, but it really requires a very greenfield situation. You're not going to convince your Android team and your iOS team to start scrapping some of their core components. And then you got to find people who are C++, wizards, and I'm not one of those. Yeah.
I'll pass.
Yeah, well, I'll go to you next.
What
project management or like sprint management tools do you use for your own personal work flow or your team's workflow?
We're like heavily committed to using Jira. We use that for everything. We use Zendesk for some customer support stuff that jumps into Jira. We have like Slack integrations with Jira. So that's pretty much what we use, like, to keep track of everything across the whole company. Yeah.
We typically use Pivotal Tracker to track design and development work. We also use the job story format, if you're familiar, which is like a different way to write user stories that has, it's got a few different layers in it so that you don't forget what the end goal of the user is, basically.
We use Jira to do that, yeah.
Yeah, so you need some sort of bug tracking. So Jira or Pivotal Tracker, they both have their ups and downs. I prefer Pivotal, but we are using Jira right now. They both work. Then you need some sort of version control. So we use Bitbucket. Again, GitHub's a great serviceable solution. And then we also use a bit of Trello here and there for just general purpose. But we're trying to migrate away from that.
Cool. So where do you see the platform in like long term, like 5-10 years? And do you ever get concerned that you're like pigeonholing yourself, like with one platform, that being Android, like in case it like goes away one day? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. There will come a day when Android doesn't exist anymore. That is inevitable. It's going to happen. It'll be obsolete at some point in the future. I imagine it in a like 8 to 10 year time frame. If it was sooner, I'd be a little surprised based on all the investment that's being done in Android. If it was later, I'd also be surprised if something better didn't come along. But there will definitely be a point in the future where Android is obsolete. I don't think that we're necessarily pigeonholing ourselves completely, because the skills that we learn as Android developers are going to be transferable. If we needed to pick up iOS development or even web development with JavaScript or something, like I feel confident that I'd be able to transfer that knowledge over.
Yeah, I think I'll second that, because most developers, we don't just learn one thing anyway. We're learning like all kind of things, or we probably didn't start as an Android developer to begin with, or because it's based off Java anyway, so most of us probably started in Java or started from somewhere else. And in the tech community, you're kind of always picking up new things, and you kind of use the basis of programming in general to learn other things anyway. So like, just because I'm really focused on Android now doesn't mean that in a second I can't pick up Angular or anything other thing that comes out there that's the newest hottest thing, and start learning it. And now I'm a developer in that too. So I just have some personal projects, or get some training, and then now you are doing the next best thing. That's kind of what I like about being a developer. You can transfer the core understanding of how to program and put it into any other language or that comes out, a framework anyway, that comes out.
I mean, yeah, I think the concepts in Android, with Android you essentially have, a sort of miniaturized full stack, in any given application. You're going to have a persistence layer, you're going to have, sort of like a business layer, and you're going to have a UI layer. And with mobile development, with Android development, you have to understand concepts like threading, like I said, interacting with a database, and then UI concepts too. Those are extensible to many different areas of programming, and at the same time, object-oriented and functional programming knowledge is also extensible outside of the realm of Android. So it's not something that I really concern myself with.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just design, design's been around forever. We're not going to die anytime soon. But learning one particular platform and learning a design language, or learning how a user interacts with it is transferable also. So if that is something that you're interested in as a developer, any platform is going to be about how a user interacts with it. So.
Yeah, I think I definitely do fear about pigeonholing myself and being that 65-year-old guy that's like, back in my day on Android. And you kids now, you don't know what, but you're actually at a loss because all the younger people know the pertinent skills and you don't. So I definitely do fear that, unlike everyone else here. I mitigate that mostly by trying to keep my peripheral vision up I don't have time to see what's really happening in iOS or what's really happening in web development, but I know it's out there, and I know where I could go if I needed to start learning those things. And really, I'd like to think that I'm not becoming a better Android developer. I'm just getting really good at learning stuff really quickly.
Yeah.
Like, I need to know how to do this thing right now. How can I learn how to do this one thing right now? And then tomorrow I will learn how to do this one thing. So the thing is getting better at learning things. Like, okay, I can look at this for 5 seconds and know this isn't going to help me solve my problem. I can ditch it. And practicing those, like, learning to learn skills is what's going to help me, you know, not be an Android developer in 10 or 15 years.
Yes.
So, one other question. Do any of you do automated testing in your projects currently?
Yes. So I just recently switched to a company. So we don't have a lot at the moment, so I can talk mostly about my last project. But we did have, we spent a lot of time and investment into automating our testing. We were using a tool called BuddyBuild that I like a lot. It will do unit testing. It will do like just pure JUnit unit testing. It'll do Roboelectric stuff seamlessly. It will run Espresso tests. It integrated directly with, I'm going to mess this up, it's now Firebase Device Lab. It's basically Google's device farm. Automatically integrate with that and send your tests off to that and report back with screenshots. And we were running that every master merge, and that was super, super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, we use a company called Sauce Labs to do smoke testing with Appium, and we also have some UI tests written with Espresso that run natively as part of our builds.
We have the infrastructure set up, so we run automated testing via Jenkins. So every time you push a commit, it'll check out and run it and test it. But the breadth of our testing is so small that I'm going to answer no to your question. Like, we need to get better at actually writing tests. I know a lot of shops will do code review, and like you have to have the test there for it to be passed. But right now, we have the infrastructure set up, but we need to be more disciplined about actually writing the test, and that can be difficult.
Oops, no more questions. Thank you guys for all attending and coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to plug your social media handles so people can get in touch with you or follow you on Twitter, and we get one more question.
So Jason mentioned that there should be like a small group of people that we meet like at different places. So I mean the main problem with that is communication, right? So is everybody on like the Tech 404 Android channel? Is there place where we can all go and like chat with each other?
I like that channel.
Yeah, Tech 404 Android channel is pretty good. You know?
Yeah.
It's a Slack channel.
And it's is it? I mean, I know it's not invite only, but technically, is it invite only? Do you have to get invited to it, or can you just go sign up for it?
I think you have to get invited for it.
Okay.
I got invited for it.
Okay.
Months ago.
I signed up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, tech404.io.
Okay. It's not invite only in that it's exclusive, but you might have to actually get an invite. So if you want one, come see me. I will get you invited. It's just a Slack channel where we chat about Android stuff, specifics, technical problems, or I think we talked about who all was coming to this event tonight. So yeah, come see me after this, and I'll make sure you get invited.
Once again, thank everyone.
Thank you.
Before everybody leaves, how many of you guys are interested in just hearing about design stuff? Because I wonder, like, okay, so like a lot of people. Okay, cool, that's good to know.
Thank you guys.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
That's cool.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Anytime. We got